Hello everyone and welcome back to another Brad Teaches video. Today we're on the second of our Snap walkthrough video series, this time showing off the looks tab. As you can see, we are on our purple blocks and these have everything to do with what your sprites look like, some of the costumes, sizes, and so on. So as you can see here, I have 3 different sprites that I'm going to show with because it definitely helps to kind of give these different examples. I have Alonzo, which is this sort of fireball looking guy. I have a dino sprite up there, which has a dino costume. And then I also have this costume that I've named Puffs, and you're going to see why in just a second. Our first block is our switch to costume. And you can see here it's selected Apple. If we go to our costumes tab up here, this is where we can import images, and we can also select from a pre-built library that Snap has to offer on all the different costumes and shapes that our sprites can have. So if you see, if I manually click on each one of these images, our sprite on the right hand side changes, and it changes either to this turtle sort of pre-built arrow sprite that we always have, or this bowl of cheesy puffs or an apple. If I go to scripts right here, I can change that costume programmatically by selecting switch to costume. And here, if I go back to turtle, you can see it goes to that. But if I go to cheesy puffs instead, it will go to my bowl of sort of these hot Cheetos that we have. If I want to do this in a way where I go through a pre-built list and I change to not a specific costume, but I just change costumes, you can see I have my next costume block right here, which really just switches off between the 2 costumes that I've already imported. This, of course, does not work if I want to go to a different sprite that has no other costumes and I want to select next. Right here, I'm on Alonzo, which is sort of my fire-looking sprite in the middle. And he never goes to anything else. But of course I can change manually back to the turtle sprite, which is our default, but I can't do that through next costume. If we wanted to see what costume we were on or report it out later in our program, we can use the costume reporter right here, which if I click will tell me in an array fashion which costume our sprite is on. And if I wanted to display that at all times, I could have it listed up here. And you can see if I change my dino costume to the turtle sprite, it changes to 0, which is the beginning of our array. If I wanted my sprite to say something, I could use these say blocks and these think blocks. Here, say, instead of say hello, we could say hello world, and we could click that, and for 2 seconds, my dino will say hello world. And then of course the think block is the same, just with a sort of text to a thought bubble instead of a speech bubble. The next 3 blocks that I can show are all reporters. They are the width or blank of costume, a stretch, and the new costume list block. And they can get rather complicated, so you do see I have a lot on my screen. Here at the very first, the width of the current costume is really just a reporter you can use for about anything you want. Here it'll give the width of a costume that is not displayed on screen. You can say it gives 176, which of course is the distance on our Snap stage. I also have the stretch block right here, which is really just a reporter. If I wanted to say, let's say stretch of the Apple costume, X 100% and Y 100%, it's going to show me an image right here on the canvas. But if I was going to change Y to 20, you can see it's going to show me a much more flattened version. Now, to actually use this block in a real script, you would move it into the switch block, and you would then use it to do the same thing there on the screen. So here, if we switch it to 10%, you can see that sprite will change even further. And of course, if I want to change back, I could just use my switch to costume. Now, the last block in that reporter set that I want to show is one that's a little bit tricky, and I wouldn't worry about much because, of course, it is not something we're going to use all the time. It is the new costume, the list icon right here, which we'll get to in a later video and show more of. It's width and height. So here, I'm going to switch this to current, which means just use the width and the height of the current sprite that I have, the costume, which is the apple right here. But I also need another sprite in order to make this work. So I'm going to use the pixel of current, which is what we just looked at, and it is going to show the pixels of our apple. So here, if I click, it's going to show a very long list of all of the pixels of my image, which for now I'm not going to worry about. But that does give me an array of different things that are going on of all the pixels within my costume. If I pull this up, this pixels of current costume apple times a list of 4 numbers is able to change those pixels based off that list. So if I put this back into my block right there, what this is going to do in this case is take all the color basically out of my image and revert us back to this sort of black looking, tomato apple shape. And if I want to change this to show something different, I could do that, which takes out a different set of color from my apple. After our 3 sort of more complicated reporters, we have a long list of what I would say are more simple effects that we can use on our sprites. Here I have my first, which is changing an effect on my sprite by a certain amount. Here, if I'm on the Alonzo sprite and I want to make him, say, more or less transparent, I can click right here, and now the Alonzo is slowly starting to fade all the way away. Like we saw on one of our last sprites, we can also change color, which I won't show in this particular case, but you could change the fisheye effect, which changes how large Alonzo's head is. If I want to go back, I can then of course set that to a particular set. So here I have my switch to costume block aligned with my set fisheye or whatever effect to 0. And if I click, that brings me back down to what my original sprite looked like. I would not say try to go on the negative here because that can sometimes have kind of weird effects if you want to go backwards from what you just did. Instead, I like the set and I bring that back to 0 to sort of nullify whatever effect I've used. I can also, of course, clear graphic effects. So if I want to set my ghost effect to a certain amount, and then maybe I'll do fish eye as well, and I also want to do the whirl effect, and I want to bring it all back, I could clear all my graphic effects at once. After these different effects, you can have a reporter to show what the effects are. So here I'm going to show the level of brightness effect, which in this case is 0. If I do the whirl a couple of times and I select that instead, it is going to read out for me the level of whirl that we have, which in this case is 25, or no, I'm sorry, this case is 150. I can also change my size by both a multiplier and by percentages. So here I want to change my size by 10, and you can see I'm doing so, but maybe I want to set myself to 10% of what I currently am. That makes my Alonzo very small. If I want to go by 100%, I go right back to the size I previously was. And let me go ahead and clear all my graphical effects. The remainder of our blocks have to do with the different metrics like size. We can also show and hide our sprites, which becomes very useful when maybe we're starting a program. I can make sure that Alonzo is not there, but he is still technically on the screen, or I can show, which then brings him back to being visible. I can see if he's shown, so I can know whether Alonzo is being shown or not in a Boolean form. And then I can manipulate layers. In order to show how we manipulate layers, if I place all my sprites on top of each other, you can see that that last sprite that I selected and moved is going to be in the front layer. However, let's say that I know in a program, for some reason, the apple and the dino, I want to be in the background, or maybe there's a flame special effect that I want to be in the background instead. If I go and I say I want to bring Alonzo to the front layer, I can do so. Alonzo now is in the very front. If I want to move him instead to the back, I can do that. I can also manipulate him between each one of my different layers, so I can put him between things. And let's say I want to go back -1 layers. I can bring him further and further forward, or of course send him further and further back, which you might want to do in case you're working on scenery or something else instead. That, of course, is all for our looks blocks. Please join me next time when we go over the sound blocks so you can see how to bring audio as well as visual into your Snap projects.